and welcome to our webinar. Today we're going to talk about the critical importance of MBA letters of recommendation in your application process. My name is Nelly and I'll be the moderator on behalf of UniMy Prep team. I'm here with a very interesting guest, Dr. Don Martin, who has extensive experience working with MBA applicants. He has served at Chicago Booth, Columbia University, and Northwestern University. And now he has his own consultancy firm called Grad School Road Map. Don, before giving you the word, I just want to let everyone who is listening that you can ask questions anytime during the webinar, just using the Q&A box or the chat box. It will take time to answer at the end of the session. All questions are welcome, so don't hesitate. So now I think everything is set, so I'm giving the floor to you, Don.
Nelly, thank you so much. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this very important webinar on the critical importance of recommendation letters as an MBA applicant or as any graduate school applicant, quite frankly. I was sharing with Nelly before we started today, this is the very first time I've been asked to actually do a webinar focused solely on recommendation letters. And I'm so delighted that I was asked to do this because, in my opinion, as the title of the webinar says, they are critically, they are critically important. I chose that word deliberately. They are critical. And as you're going to see as we go through this presentation today, you're going to go away with some very, very important tips and information that could have a very, very positive effect on your MBA applications. What you're seeing on this slide is just a little bit of information about my own background. I have been very fortunate. I spent my entire career in the field of graduate admissions, student services, financial aid, and so forth. I've had the privilege of traveling to 64 countries during this 28 years that I spent in full-time higher education, meeting with literally thousands of international students all over the world, as well as students within the United States. I love my work. It was absolutely incredible, those 28 years in full-time higher ed. During that time, I probably personally evaluated over 125,000 applications. About 80,000 of those were during the 11 years I spent as Dean of Admissions and Associate Dean for Enrollment Management at Chicago Booth. So I have a background in this area, and for me, even more importantly, I love it. It's been absolutely incredible. The last 15 years, I've been working with Grad School Road Map since I published my book in 2008. There's a second edition now available. I'll share a little bit more with you about that for a few seconds at the end of the presentation. But perhaps most importantly, what I'd like for you to take away from this slide is the second bullet point. I've sat where you're sitting right now, twice. I have a master's degree and a PhD. I earned 2 graduate degrees. I've been there. I know what it is like to be thinking about this. It may be a little daunting. It may be a little fearful. It may be a little stressful for those of you that are tuning in today. And if so, you're in very good company. Many prospective graduate students are a little nervous about how this is all going to work. There's a lot that goes into preparing strong applications. One of those topics, one of those components of this process is outstanding letters of recommendation. So let's get right to our agenda. What am I going to talk with you about today? Well, first of all, I'm going to make a few brief comments about Grad School Road Map. Then I'm going to talk about something I share in every webinar I ever do, the biggest mistake MBA and graduate applicants make every year without fail. Perhaps you're making this mistake. It's something you can correct pretty easily. Then we're going to focus on some important aspects of recommendation letters. Why are they important? For instance, what is the definition of a good recommender? What is that? What does that mean? And finally, 7 critical tips regarding your recommendation letters. And I'm telling you, If you will keep these in mind and you'll keep this whole presentation as part of your application process, I promise you, you're going to have an application that's going to stand out a little bit more. And I'll explain what I mean by that as we go through the presentation today. Then I'm going to share just a little bit about my book, my coaching services, some of the upcoming webinars I'm going to be doing with the Advent group with Unimi Prep, and then we're going to take some of your questions. By the way, I love questions. I love them. There are no bad questions. There are no dumb questions. Really, if you have a question, I'll do my best to answer it in the time we have at the conclusion of the presentation. I expect to speak about 30 minutes more. That's all. This is not going to be drug out on and on. I'm going to speak very quickly, but hopefully very thoroughly. And then if you have any questions, you can enter them in the Q&A box right here on this session panel. There's something that you can see where it says chat or Q&A. The Q&A box, that's the place. Any questions you want to ask me. And if by chance you have a question about something I don't talk about today related to the MBA application process, don't hesitate to ask. Any questions are great, they're good, and most of all, they're welcome. Okay, let's start with a brief word about what I now do with Grad School Road Map. I founded the company in 2008 in an effort to provide a resource, if you will, for prospective students, applicants, alumni, enrollment management staff. I have the privilege of doing a lot in my work with Grad School Road Map, but a large portion of that is working one-on-one with MBA and graduate school applicants. It's been a phenomenal opportunity these last 15 years. I'll tell you more about my coaching work as we get toward the close of this session, but we are here to help. On our website, you'll find over 98 different blogs in the blog section, some of them written by Unimi Prep, I might add. So please take a look at that section. Obviously, they are free to access about every part of the application process. There's even a section for MBA applicants on this website blog section, as well as for international students. So please make yourself at home there on the website and take a look at those free resources, almost 100 different articles for your reading enjoyment. Okay, now let's jump into the actual agenda for today. What is the biggest mistake prospective MBA or prospective graduate students make? This happens every year, and I don't believe it's necessarily intentional. Of course, no one is deliberately going to want to make a mistake, but they do. And there are many mistakes you can make as an applicant. There are lots of things that come to mind, but this one, over the 40-some years that I've been working with prospective graduate students, this mistake seems to be repeated over and over and over again. And it is this: not doing adequate research when? Before applying. If you don't take anything else away from today's presentation, I truly hope you will take this away. The biggest mistake I believe you can make is not doing adequate research before you apply. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, here's how to avoid the mistake, and we're going to talk about these very quickly. But let me just say, many applicants that I've met in the US and outside of the US seem to rely on two major criteria to help them decide where they're going to apply. First, word of mouth, what others say about a particular MBA program. And secondly, what is the ranking or the competitiveness or the prestige of this program? And that's all they look at. Now, am I suggesting to you that they aren't helpful, that word of mouth or rankings aren't useful? No, I do believe they can be useful. But if that's the entirety of your research as to where you're going to apply, I believe you're hurting yourself. in my experience and my opinion, if you do some good research beforehand, oftentimes you end up applying to some schools you might never have thought about if you didn't expand your search. In my book, in chapter 1, which is all about the research process, I provide a list of 26 components of a graduate school program that you might want to check out and compare before you make the decision on the 5 or 6 or 7 programs to which you'll actually apply. Most MBA, and I might say graduate school applicants at the master's level, apply to between 7 and 10 programs on average. However, the way in which that list is determined is often very short-sighted. In my opinion, number 1 here on this slide, you should spread the net wide at the beginning. Did you know there are over 800 accredited MBA programs worldwide, over 800 of them. And it doesn't make logical sense that only 10 or 5 or 2 are worth your time. In fact, if you spread the net wide, I would suggest you start off with at least 20 business schools on your list, at least 20. Start off with that number and then create a spreadsheet and begin to actually make some comparisons on several components of those programs, such as class size, faculty-student ratio, interaction with faculty, study abroad opportunities. What is the hiring percentage? What are the placement rates? Do they offer financial aid for international students? If so, what's available? And most of all, on that spreadsheet, you've got to put in there, what do current students say about this program? Or what do recent graduates say about this program? Another one, what has been my experience of my interaction with the admissions staff? How have they treated me? How have I been made to feel like I'm welcome there? These are critical questions. If you're mistreated as a prospective student, do you think it's going to get any better if once you're there, once you're kind of stuck there? The way you are treated early on in the process says an awful lot about that institution. And then once you've created that spreadsheet, do some genuine comparisons. Compare these options and say to yourself, is this where I really would want to be? Does this sound like a place where I want to spend at least maybe 2 years of my life, possibly moving to another country, being in a place where my home language is not the first language anymore, and adjusting to all of that and doing a program? Is that really where I want to do it? I'll tell you, I can't tell you how many of the clients I've worked with over 650 graduate school applicants in these past 15 years. About half of those are MBA students, by the way. And in that time, those who followed this simple suggestion of doing their research, 9 times out of 10, they changed their priority list once they did this. They completely reorganized their options. Some schools that were initially higher on the list dropped to the bottom. Others that were lower went up to the top. It is absolutely worth your time. And there's so much information available on websites. There's a plethora of information out there for you to get absolute facts. By the way, if you reach out to students or alumni through your networking, if you ask if you can speak with some students or recent graduates, here are 2 questions you absolutely want to ask them. Question number 1, what did or do you like most and least about this program? They should be able to answer both of those. There is no program that's perfect out there, none. If they can't tell you what they didn't like about the program, that speaks volumes. Either they're afraid to say something, or they really must not have thought all that highly of it if they can't even talk about some things that they would improve if they could. The second question is almost more important than the first. Question 2, If you had it to do over again, knowing what you now know about this program, would you still go? I think I would want to know that from as many as I could within reason who are part of that particular MBA program. Was it worth it? Did they feel they got what they came for? And would they go there again? Please remember the last part of this slide. Perception about the options you are considering is where you end up after you've done your research, not where you start out. Many applicants I speak with come to me already deciding where they're going to apply only because of a ranking or because someone told them they should think about it. I think that limits you. So I think you get my point here. The best thing you can do for yourself is make sure you know as much about the options you're considering and that you spread the net wide in the beginning and then narrow it down to those schools to which you will apply. I promise you, this will be worth your time. The rewards are absolutely huge if you take the time to do your research. Okay, now let's get into the topic of today, which are letters of recommendation. And I'm sorry here, it looks like I put the word letters twice. I should have said, why are letters of recommendation important, and left out that second letters. But at any rate, the question is, why do I believe these are so important? Well, let me share this. They're important for three reasons, perhaps more. But this, first of all, recommendation letters provide you with the best way to promote yourself, to say good things. The worst thing you can do as an applicant is to come across as arrogant or overly congratulatory of yourself. There's a fine line between being confident and being arrogant. There's a difference. A lot of my coaching work with my students focuses on this. How do you present a confident image without coming across as if you're arrogant? The place where you can sing your praises, so to speak, is through your recommenders. That's who can do that for you. So that's one of the reasons this is so important, is that you have an outside individual or individuals that are talking about what a great candidate you are. The second reason that these letters are important is that they can add credibility to what you have provided in your resume and your essays. We're going to talk about how to help you do that with your recommenders so that they are adding to a fuller picture and story about you through these very important letters. It adds to the information you are providing. This last reason is perhaps the most critical one for me. Unfortunately, the vast majority of letters of recommendation, I mean this here, are completely useless. They do not help at all. In the 28 years that I served as a dean of admissions, reviewing, as I mentioned earlier, over 125,000 applications, I would say about 90 to 95% of those letters of recommendation meant nothing. They didn't help at all because they weren't properly done. And when they are done properly, that means your application is going to move up in the recognition of it and in the competitiveness of your application. This can make the difference. I'm telling you, many applicants don't think about this. Many deans of admissions don't share this, but I'm telling you, as a former dean of admissions, 28 years, and still in the work I'm doing now with my clients, your recommendation letters are critical. If you're going to have they can make the difference. Let's say your academic section is a little less competitive. You have strong recommendation letters. I'm telling you, that could put you over the top for admission. So remember, this is very important. They're worth the time it takes to get good recommenders and to help them prepare good letters for you. So once again, these are the three areas I believe, or three reasons why recommendation letters are so very important. Now, next, what is the definition of a good recommender? Now, I'm going to pause for just a moment because I'm going to grab a drink of water here in a second. But while I do that, can I ask you if you would think, what do you believe is a good recommender? How would you answer that question if I were to ask you that today? Just give it a few moments. All right, you have an idea of what you might tell me? Let's see how close your answer comes to mine. Now, obviously, there are several definitions for a good recommender, but for me, a good recommender is someone who knows you how, both long enough and well enough to honestly and credibly provide the information requested by the admissions committee. That is a good recommender. Most important, someone that knows you long enough and well enough to do a good letter. And oftentimes, I think applicants have a sense that if someone they're asking to recommend them is famous or is a well-known graduate of the program they're applying to, or is the CEO of their company, and they happen to know them a little bit, that somehow that will in and of itself result in an overwhelming reception to that recommendation. Not so fast. I have so many stories I could share with you, but let me just share one very quickly. One day when I was working at Chicago booth, one of my colleagues came in just very excited. You could tell something was very exciting. And he said, Don, you're not going to believe this. You're not going to believe what happened. And I said, well, what's going on? He said, look who we got a letter from. And I looked at the letter, and it was from the Vice President of the United States. Now, this was back at the time when I'm not sure how many of you would follow all of our crazy politics in the United States, and they sure have been crazy of late. But anyway, this gentleman's name was Al Gore, and he was vice president at the time, and he was writing a letter of recommendation for one of our applicants, and I think the applicant thought that by having the Vice President of the United States write him a letter of recommendation, that would just open the floodgates, and we'd say, oh, we don't need to know anymore, you're admitted. Well, I opened the letter, and it was kind of exciting to see this letter on the letterhead of the Vice President and all this. Are you ready? Do you know what the letter was 2 sentences. It did not address our admissions committee, dear Booth Admissions Committee. It just said, to whom it may concern, or dear sir, or something like that. 2 sentences. I am writing to recommend John Smith. I don't remember his name, who it was, but I'm writing to recommend John Smith to the Chicago Booth School of Business. That was the first sentence. You know what the second sentence was? John is an upstanding citizen of the United States, and he will do us proud. Sincerely yours, Al. That was the whole letter. Do you want to know something? That applicant was denied. That applicant was absolutely denied. Not just because that letter was so bad, but because of other aspects of his candidacy. But I think he thought that would make all the difference. It doesn't. You need to ask individuals who are able to provide credibly and honestly a complete recommendation as requested by the admissions committee. Now, I've seen we already have one question that's come into the Q&A box. Way to go. I hope we're going to see some more as we go through this now. And actually, we're coming to the third. This section will be a little longer, but this is the third and final part of my suggestions now of how do you prepare, how do you provide good letters of recommendation. Here are 7 what I call critical tips. Please, I hope you'll write these down. Number 1, choose those who you believe will strongly support your candidacy. Now, there's a different, not tell the admissions committee you're perfect. That's something else we're going to talk about in a minute. But that you believe they will strongly support you, obviously. That's what we're expecting. On a rare occasion, we would have a recommender write a letter and say, I don't recommend this candidate. I don't think they're ready. Now, those were helpful. If someone asked someone to recommend them and they didn't, that was a pretty telling, but most of the time they were positive. Of course, you want to be fairly certain that these individuals will strongly support your candidacy. Number two, you want to try and choose individuals who you get a sense that they're going to take this responsibility that you've given them seriously, that they're going to put some time into it. I've always been so impressed when some of the recommenders for my coaching clients contact me and want to talk with me and say, you know, Dr. Don, I really want to do a good job for my applicant here. What can I do? Would you be willing to take a look at my letter? Of course I would be. Now that's confidential. I don't discuss that with the applicant, but nonetheless, when I hear things like that, that's very impressive to me. You want to get a sense not only that these folks will strongly support you, but do they really care? Is this something that they realize is a very, very important component of your application and could really make or break your application? The third tip, this is very important. Make sure that if they're asked, they can talk about a weakness. This is a huge mistake applicants and recommenders make in believing that the recommender is supposed to make the applicant sound perfect. Sometimes in a recommendation, there will be a grid. There will, on the left-hand column, will be several characteristics. Teamwork ability, motivation, intelligence, communication style, integrity, whatever it is. They list these character qualities, and the recommender is supposed to rate the applicant maybe from superior, outstanding, good, fair, poor. Now, of course, you do not want a recommender who is going to rate you poorly, but please listen to me carefully. You do not want a recommender who's going to check every single box superior. Do you know what that looks like to someone like me, an admissions dean? It looks like two things happen. They didn't take this seriously. They just thought, oh, if I check superior, that'll make the applicant look good, so that's what I'll do. No, 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 no. No applicant, no one is superior on every single component of a recommendation. Nobody is. And if that's how that, the minute if I looked at one of those grids and I saw superiors checked across every single one, that immediately lessened the credibility of that recommender right off the bat. I thought, okay, here's somebody who didn't take this seriously, who didn't take the time to really think about these areas. And oftentimes, recommenders are asked to actually say, what is a weakness of this candidate or an area they need to work on? And they should better well be able to say that. That shows that they know you well enough and that you're not afraid to acknowledge that you're a human being. No one is perfect. Nobody. We're not asking for deep, dark secrets of your life. No, 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 no. But all of us have things we need to work on in our lives. Some people are procrastinators. They tend to put things off and have to play catch up sometimes. Does that ruin their career? No, not, but it's something they have to be aware of. For me, one of my weaknesses is that I can be very impatient. I want to get things done. I want to get them done now. I don't like to wait. If somebody's ahead of me in the line, if somebody's in front of me on the highway, I have to talk to myself. Has this destroyed my career? Absolutely not. Has it been a problem on occasion? Yes, it has. And I've acknowledged it. And it hasn't ruined anything, but it is something I'm very aware of. And those who know me well would agree with that. So your recommender, we said in number one, they need to strongly support you, yes, but they do not. The last thing you want them to do is make you sound like you're perfect. You have no weaknesses, you're superior on all the character traits. Absolutely, that immediately looks fake. It doesn't look reliable. and it makes you look less credible, not just your recommenders. So please make sure they're ready, willing, and able to address all of the questions about your strengths and a weakness, which is most likely what they are going to be asked to address. Okay, I see some more questions coming in. This is excellent. Let's move to point number 4. Some recommenders are asked, in addition to a recommendation form, if you will, that they're asked to complete, they may be asked to write a separate letter on your behalf. Make sure they are willing to do that. When you ask them, you might want to alert them that some of these recommendation sections of the application, they'll be asked to do this. Now, as you may or may not know, the way it tends to work right now for most recommendation sections of applications, if you provide the recommender information in the application, the admissions committee will then reach out to the recommender and tell them what they need to do to submit their letter. That's how that works. So you need to let them know that if they agree to do this, it's possible that they might be asked to prepare a letter to go along with the form that they fill out. Now, if they're submitting letters for you to more than one school, they could probably reuse some of that letter for other applications. It's not like they have to rewrite a letter every time, but they just need to know that they may be asked to prepare a letter in addition to the recommendation form and be ready to do that. Number 5. This is paramount, ladies and gentlemen, and unfortunately, it doesn't always happen. And if it is discovered that it didn't, that you wrote those letters yourself, you will be denied immediately. No questions asked. And this is happening more often. Admissions committees are becoming more savvy. And I'll tell you, you hurt yourself if you do not have your recommenders write their own letters. Now, some recommenders will say, well, I don't speak English very well, and I'm afraid that it won't. Well, ask them to get it translated. They can get it translated. Some, as I said, some of my coaching clients had their recommenders send me their letters, and I provided very good feedback for them. There is a way to do this, but they need to write. This needs to come in their voice, and technically, from an ethical standpoint, a standpoint of honesty, you may even be asked to affirm in your application that you had nothing to do with the writing of your letters. You also may be asked if you waive your right to see them, and you should say, yes, I do. You should always waive your right to see your letters. Why? That means you're comfortable with what the recommenders are going to say. You're not worried about if you're worried about what they're going to say, you shouldn't ask them in the first place. If you're confident about how they're going to do this, then you can legitimately waive your right to see them, and you should be ready to honestly sign that you had nothing to do with the writing of those letters. Okay, number 6. It is absolutely critical for your recommenders to provide examples of what they say about you, especially when they're talking about your strengths. Let's say the admissions committee at XYZ Business School asks the recommender to provide 3 of your strongest qualities, 3 of them. Okay, so let's say they choose leadership, communication style, and being proactive, not having anybody have to tell you to do something. You do it, you're reliable. That's great. My question is, how do you know that? Why are you telling me that this person is a leader, that they're a good communicator, or that they're reliable? How do you know that? If you don't have examples of these things, the admissions committee could assume that this person just grabbed something out of a hat and thought it sounded good. So, oh, I'll say this, I'll say that. They must be able to provide solid examples of what they are saying about your qualifications or your character qualities. Very, very, very important. When they say it, when they make a statement about you, they need to be thinking, how do I know that? What will I tell the admissions committee to demonstrate that I know that about this person? Okay. Final tip, very important. Provide only the number of letters that are required, unless you get approval from the admissions office to send an addition. Some applicants would send us truly 5 or 7 letters of recommendation. We had only requested 2 or 3 in most cases. That's a clear violation of our directions. And not following directions, as you probably know, is a key way to become denied. If you cannot follow a simple direction, that speaks to how you'll behave if you're a student and you decide you don't want to follow a guideline or a rule or a policy. If you have been asked to submit, let's say, 2 letters of recommendation, and you feel so strongly that there's another person who could provide an added dimension to your candidacy that you believe would be critical, you can send an email message to the admissions email and ask them for permission to add 1 additional letter. 9 times out of 10, 2 things will happen. They'll say yes, but more importantly, that's going to show them that you respected the process enough to ask and not make an assumption. That's huge. So make sure that you only submit what's required unless you've had the respect to honor the process and ask the admissions office if you might be able to send. I only suggest 1 additional letter. I don't suggest more than that, but 1 additional is reasonable, and I believe there's no problem asking that. All right, we're coming to the close. In about 3 to 5 minutes, I'm going to be turning the mic over to Nellie. I know there's 3 questions that have already come in. I hope there will be more. I've mentioned my book, just a brief word about this. It's on the website, gradschoolroadmap.com, which you'll see in a moment. This is the only comprehensive book on the grad school research and application process out there. Only 105 pages. If you go onto the website, go on the book section, click the order and type in a special promo code, GSRM, which stands for Grad School Road Map, you'll receive the book at half price. So I urge you to take a look at it. The 2nd edition was released just a few years ago, up-to-date, relevant information for you as an MBA or graduate school applicant. Coaching, I do, as I said, offer one-on-one coaching. I bring my 28 years of application evaluation experience to the table. This does not cost thousands of dollars. I promise. 97% acceptance rate and over 16 million in funding so far. And I do offer a free consultation. So if you would be interested in speaking with me about that and learning more about my work, please feel free to reach out. I'd love to connect with you and answer any questions you might have in that regard. And lastly, we have 3 more wonderful webinars coming up thanks to Unimi Prep and Nellie. I just want to say I'm so honored, truly, that I've been asked to partner with Unimi Prep and offer these webinars. This is something I love doing. Next month, we're going to talk about planning your MBA application deadline strategy, some things to talk about there. I might expand that a little bit more to some other application tips, but this will be mostly about your application, getting your applications ready. Then in September and October, we're going to talk a little bit more about something else that does not often get recognized in webinars specifically, and that's the interview process. And in September, we're going to talk about what's going through the mind of the interviewer, the person who's going to ask the questions. In October, we're going to talk about what's going through your mind as the interviewee and what you need to be thinking about. So this is going to be exciting. I hope you put these dates on your calendar. I know Nellie and her team will be advising you on when these are happening. So we'll do one next month, then we'll take a break in August, then we'll be back in September and October, and that will complete our webinar series for this year. And I hope you'll join us. If you are back from prior webinars I've done earlier this year and you're joining us today, I'm saying this awfully late, but welcome back. I'm glad you joined us. If you're here for the first time, we're thrilled you're here. And I see that it is now 40 minutes past the hour. My usual goal is to speak for 40 to 45 minutes. So I think I've reached that goal. And I think we at least have 5 questions so far. This is outstanding. I'm thrilled that they're coming in. So I hope you're going to ask more. Maybe you'll hear somebody ask a question and hear me say something. Remember, your questions can be about anything, not just recommenders. They can be about any part of the process you want to ask me. Nellie, thanks again, as always. It is such a pleasure. I mean this. You don't pay me to say this. It's from my heart. I love working with you and Martina and the rest of the team there. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I'm now going to turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Don. And you should know that the feelings are mutual. Thank you for sharing your experience and tips. Indeed, we have 5 questions, and they actually are all related to letters of recommendation.
Excellent. Okay,
yeah.
good.
Okay, let's start with the first one. This is something I know that a lot of people are interested in. Should I waive my right to see the letters of recommendations that my recommenders have submitted?
Oh, this is a great question. It may have been asked earlier in the presentation before you saw me talk about this, or heard me talk about it. But yes, I strongly recommend, as I mentioned earlier, if you don't waive your right to see the letters, that tends to convey to the admissions committee that you're afraid of what the recommender is going to say. And that's not the situation. When I had my recommenders for my master's program and my PhD program, I did not see their letters. I had no idea what they said. I was admitted to both programs, but I was confident that my recommenders were going to support me, that they were very pleased to write those letters. So in my strong opinion, yes, you help yourself, provided you've got good recommenders that are going to support you, then waiving your right to see those letters is a help. Yes.
Thank you very much, Don.
Sure.
Okay, is it okay to ask a letter of recommendation from someone who knows me in a personal capacity, not professional?
That is an excellent question. Thank you for mentioning that. Typically, it is not suggested that you ask someone on a personal level, certainly not a significant other, a spouse, a partner, a family member. Those are not recommended and probably wouldn't be accepted. If you have a very close association with someone in a personal way, beyond those individuals I just said you shouldn't use, I'm not saying it's completely out of the question. It might depend on it. It would be based on an individual case-by-case basis. But that said, most admissions offices in the section on recommenders that's in the application instructions, they give very specific information about what they want. They might say, for instance, we want 2 letters of recommendation, one from an academic and one from a professional. Now, if you feel that there's someone else, as I said, that will be objective and can provide a very good recommendation for you in a professional way, and happens to know you for a long time in a personal way, not a partner, not a spouse, not a family member, then what you would do is, like I suggested earlier, you would write to the admissions office and ask them, describe this person and ask them if they would be accepted as one of your recommenders. Thanks for asking that question.
Thank you very much, Don. I think this is a very helpful advice.
Good.
Okay, we have 2 similar questions. It's about choosing the right recommender. The first question is coming from a person who is working in a manufacturing plant in South Asia. And this company has a headquarters in Taiwan. And he says, my line manager is the CEO based in the headquarters, and he does not speak English. I have been in this role for the past 2 years, and the only option I have is to seek a letter of recommendation from another colleague who also reports to this CEO. Will this be a problem?
No, it will not be a problem. And if you end up deciding not to use the person for whom English is not their first language, but they might have been a good recommender. You can always explain that in the application, that you weren't sure they felt comfortable preparing a letter. Now, the other thing, as I believe I mentioned, if the individual does not speak English, but would like to write a letter and have it translated, that is something that could be done. You would just ask them if they're willing to do that. And when they submit that letter, they would let the admissions committee know that they wrote it in their home language, their mother language, native tongue, but had it translated. Some recommenders might feel like that's too time consuming. They don't have the ability to do that, nor do they want to go through all of that. So I understand that in some cases with international applicants and recommenders who do not speak English, this is challenging. And if that is the case of anyone listening today, and you feel you have a really unique situation, please reach out to me. Please feel free. My email address is right here on the screen. Please feel free to contact me. I'll be happy to set up a consultation with you, no cost, no charge, and discuss this more thoroughly in terms of your own individual situation. I'm so glad you asked that question.
Thank you very much, Don.
Sure.
And yeah, again, something similar, a person saying, I cannot tell my line manager that I'm planning for an MBA education. What are my options, especially if the schools ask for only one letter of recommendation?
A wonderful question. And please, you do not need to worry if you can't do that. That is absolutely understood. Thousands of applicants every year for graduate school or business school are not able to let their employer or those they work with know they're doing this for fear that they could lose their job or they would be laid off or it would cause a problem. This happens repeatedly. And so if that is your situation, excuse me, what you want to do is find someone else in a professional capacity who can do this for you, but explain usually in most MBA applications, there is what's called an optional or additional information question. And for this question, the admissions committee might say something like, is there anything else you would like to tell us about your application? Is there anything else you would like us to know? If that's the place to let them know, you can say, I did not ask my immediate superior or supervisor to write this letter because I was concerned about my job security. It just was not possible for that. Will be absolutely fine. You will not be hurt in any way whatsoever. None of us would ever want you to put your employment in jeopardy or something like that through doing this. So that's how you would want to proceed.
Thank you very much, Don.
Sure.
Okay, we have one last question.
Right.
Before reading it out loud, I want to invite everyone. You have one last chance to ask your questions live right now, so don't hesitate. Okay, the last question is there anything I can do to help my recommender submit a good letter?
Yes. And do you know what I'm going to do in my next webinar, Nellie? I was thinking about this. I'm going to add a section on how to train your recommenders. Yes, here's what you can do. Great question. What you want to do once you have confirmed that these individuals are going to write a letter for you, if they are your supervisor, what you would want to remind them of is to possibly review your most recent performance review that they gave you. You would want to submit the most up-to-date version of your resume to them, and possibly a short paragraph telling them about your short and long-term goals. If you've already completed a rough draft of an essay, one of your essays, there's no reason you couldn't share that either. And you could even say to them, here are some things I'd like to share with you in an effort to help this. Don't ask them if you can share them. Instead, you want to ask them, when would you like me to provide them? And then they'll tell you, and then you could send them. Yes, those are definitely some things you can provide to, and again, If you happen, if any of you someday would be working with me or with another consultant on your applications, you can always ask your recommender to reach out to us. We would be happy to speak with them as well. But that's a great question. And as I said, whoever gave that question, we're going to give them a scholarship because they helped me realize I want to add this to my next webinar. So that was a great question. Way to go.
Thank you very much, Don. We don't have any more questions, but it was really wonderful covering this topic today. I hope we managed to help a lot of people. Any final words before closing the webinar?
I just thank everyone for staying on through the entire presentation with us. That was delightful to have you. I couldn't wish you more success in your graduate education aspirations. And again, if there's any way I can ever be of help, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. You can follow me on Twitter. You can join me on LinkedIn. And of course, I hope you'll join us here for some upcoming webinars. Nellie, thanks again.
Thank you very much, Don. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We wish you best of luck in your academic journey. Bye-bye, everyone.